right. Josh Dholani, aka Old Books Guy on Twitter, which I will always call Twitter, never X. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for inviting me. Good to be doing this.
How long have you been building your platform on X? One of my favorite accounts personally. And so just love to hear your backstory of how you started creating and why.
So, I've always been a reader. So I'm surprised it took me a while to get to Twitter because it is the platform where you read, instead of looking at pictures, which is what a lot of the other stuff tends to be, or video. So I started reading Twitter very intensively in 2020 because I was bored and I had a lot of free time like everyone else. And for the first time in my life, I started finding a constellation of voices which were fresh and original and interesting. And all of these guys were alive. Like usually I would only enjoy books from authors from long back. So I would enjoy Nietzsche, I would enjoy Sherlock Holmes, and I would enjoy Machiavelli. And whenever I got to more modern stuff, I could feel that these people were operating under the stress of being politically correct and that they were trying to not be, too extreme in whatever they were presenting in their books. And so that gets boring real fast. But on Twitter, these guys were very much alive human beings operating in the same time and space that I was. And they were also speaking about things which were relevant and which were interesting to me personally. So firstly, I was a reader. I think, you always start off as a consumer. You start off inspired. You start off admiring. You don't start off wanting to create. So once I was hanging out on the platform for 6 months, 12 months, then I started to get this itch that I wanted to create. So yeah, I would say it's taken me about 2.5 years to build the audience and about 6 to 8 months of lurking.
Then when did you start looking at the platform as a potential way to make money, build a platform, build a name for yourself on it?
Yeah, it wasn't that sort of direct or clear cut, but it did sort of happen. I think I started, I don't know if I remember an exact month, but I was working in marketing, I was working in advertising, I was working in content. I was helping a few brands and a few individuals polish up their social media. And the better my social media got, the better I could work for others, the more I could charge, the more I knew what I was doing. And there was a patch in the middle where I was trying to figure out what the niche should be. So the internet is divided on whether you should pick your niche or whether you should remain more broad and open-minded, like I suppose your podcast is, right? And there are advantages to both. If you remain broad, then you can do whatever you want, like you are freer and you have creative liberty. But if you pick a niche, then it's very easy for people to recognize you by something. So I ultimately decided to narrow down and pick the niche of Old Books Guy because it gave me recognition. It gave me recall. People sort of associate you with X or Y or Z. And that could be restricting. What if I want to talk about a new book, right? What if I want to talk about a movie? I can actually. I do that sometimes. But yeah, it has its advantages. And so once I picked a niche, things picked up. And even then, there were around 8 to 12 months after I picked my niche where I was tweeting and I was gaining followers. But, not at the pace that I wanted to. I have a folder in which I was tracking my goals. And one of my goals back in 2021 was to hit 2,000 followers. Right. And I thought, I'm not able to hit this number. When is this going to be? And so, but then you learn how the platform works and what people vibe with, what sort of story structure they vibe with. Because the thread format is very much a art form. It's like a novel or a poem. These online formats are very much formats, like how you would write a stage play differently than you would write a movie. You would write a novel differently than you would write a poem. So a thread is its own thing. It's its own format. And when I understood that this is an art form, it has its laws, it has its rules. There is a certain way to talk about a subject. You can pick any subject you want. Health, wealth, women, psychology, past, future, tech, history, whatever. But there's a certain format, which if you stick to, if you understand it and play within it, then your content will pick up. So understanding that was key to working out how to make money from it and how to truly make it big and so on.
And then what made you choose old books? You did mention before that that was usually what you read, but why did you land on that as your niche?
If I could screen share, I would show you how I made the decision. So this was, I suppose I think things through to the degree that I can. So I tried to think it through, so the choice ultimately was, do you want to be the new books guy, which was also available, or the old books guy? And I chose the old books guy for 3 reasons. The first reason was that if the book is new, then the author is a newcomer of sorts, and he's not that popular. No one knows him. So what's the point of covering someone no one knows? That's not how we go viral. So that was a problem. And new books don't have fans yet. So I could help the book get fans, but some of these guys, Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, these people have millions of fans around the world. So from a marketing perspective, do you want to talk about someone no one knows? Or do you want to talk about someone that all the edgy teenagers and the dissident, young men and women of the world know? Like, who do you want to talk about from a marketing perspective, right? So old books seem to be the right choice when you considered all of these 2 or 3 metrics, which were all marketing metrics. Also, given the fact that, the Lindy effect, the longer something has been around, the longer it will be around. So the fact that these books and essays were vetted by time, by other intelligent people, sort of makes my job easier. I don't have to spend so much time browsing. So my personal interest and then all of these factors.
When it comes to some of these, either philosophers or just books in general or ideas, what is it about them in particular that, I don't know, resonates with, again, people over this long period of time now that gets them to be Lindy?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for different guys, right? Kafka is for when you're depressed, Dostoevsky is when you are emerging from your depression, and Nietzsche is for when you've left your depression behind. So, people vibe with these characters, these authors, for different psychological reasons. For me, they were sort of going for the heart of the problem, whatever the problem, is. Sometimes authors dance around the point, and they don't quite cut through the bone, to the heart of the issue. And whatever I was interested in, politics, psychology, history, if someone like Nietzsche was analyzing in a very sharp, honest style. So that was appealing, that was attractive. I think these guys, you often hear about, one of the my threats is about ancient Rome, and how, they got very much interested in having a welfare state and having bread and circuses. So they would stage, these massive shows in the Colosseum, these massive fake naval battles, and they would entertain the masses with the gladiator fights and with 1,000 other things. And the people got addicted to such, they got dependent on such entertainment, and they got distracted from life itself in a way. And there are definite modern parallels. People are also becoming addicted to technology and entertainment right now, and they are immersing themselves in these fake worlds. And every second spent in a fake world is a second you could have spent in the real world, accumulating power, accumulating attention, accumulating money, accumulating contacts, accumulating social capital, right? So in a way, time is a zero-sum game. So the more you spend with your VR glasses or on your phone, the less you spend acquiring wealth, money, power, resources in the real world. So there's a cost, and what is true for the individual is true for the country. So, I think some of these books and thinkers appeal to people because they are talking about the eternal problems. They're talking about, permanent issues. There is this line from Russell Kirk, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like conservatism is a love of the permanent things. It's a concern with the permanent things, right? It's not a concern with the fad or the new thing, but with the base, with the fundamental pillars of existence, society, politics. And so I think, the more you can talk about permanent things, right, the more people are going to be interested, the longer they are going to be interested.
Why do you think humans can't solve these problems? Why do we keep having the same issues over and over again? Is it just part of the human experience that we'll never be able to learn from these things that, again, people are writing back hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we're flawed, and there are different ways of looking at it. Some people talk about the original sin doctrine, which is a religious idea. Others talk about maybe you are born with bad karma. You are just born with an imperfect slate, and you have to suffer and you have to pay for some of your past life crimes, right? Which is the doctrine of karma, among other things. It is more complex than that. But part of it is that you can't permanently, some religions do offer you the permanent solution. In fact, all religions offer you the permanent solutions, right? Like the Buddhists offer you nirvana. You're just supposed to meditate until your mind is completely clear of desire and impressions. The outside world isn't making any impressions on you and in a permanent fashion. So then you're enlightened and you're free. Yeah, why can't we solve these problems? They have, there are so many different reasons, right? Which problems? Like, what are some problems? What would you say would be a problem that has been around for a long time and we don't quite seem to be solving it or getting close to a solution?
I think the idea that you were just talking about with Rome of and when it comes to getting comfort, we, resort to degeneracy. In today's day and world, I think that's extremely prevalent with gambling, social media, porn, just everything that, we have all of our creature comforts. Like, we don't need to struggle per se, but we choose things that make us suffer in one way or another. And that just seems to be a recurring theme throughout history.
Yeah, I think people want pleasure. People want pleasure, and then people want different things, right? Like I'm just thinking of like so many things that human beings chase. People want pleasure. They want also challenge. So if the real world lacks all challenge, then people will go seek challenge in video games, right? If the real world doesn't allow them to participate in civilization and construct the world, if the real world doesn't allow them to be active players, they will choose to be active players in these world-building games, right? I was just doing a cursory Google search, and I was shocked to learn that so many of these popular games are world-building games. So it just tells you that young men have this desire to be active world builders, but then the desire is subverted. So then they find a solution in video games. And it's kind of sad, because you are allowing your energy to get misdirected, which is sad for you and it's sad for society. But there are reasons for that. Sometimes the world doesn't allow you to come and actively participate. And then the energy has to go somewhere. Yeah, it's a distraction and just sort of like vices. I think when you look at something like, like ready-made pleasure, right? Like, why is ready-made pleasure attractive? Like, why do people watch porn instead of going and talking to a woman at a bar or somewhere out? Like, why do people sort of choose the shortcut? I think there are sort of personal, it's a matter of like personal sort of impatience. It's a matter of you're personally failing to do the right thing, but it also might be a matter of not being able to conceptualize something higher than pleasure, right? So for example, if there was nothing but pleasure, you might as well watch porn. Like, who gives a shit, right? If there was nothing but, sensory pleasure and sensory excitement and sensory stimulation, you might as well just listen to whatever music you want and eat whatever you want and sleep with whoever you want or watch as much porn. But if there is something higher, then you will automatically prefer the higher, actually, right? If I give you like $10,000 and $20,000, you'll pick $20,000 because human beings have an automatic desire for the higher, for the better. So I think at a personal level, if the moment someone feels that there's something better than this, they are willing to chase it. So I think then maybe it comes back to, can society provide people a vision of the better? Can society give people examples of the better? If you tell people happiness is the highest virtue, for example, which everyone does, young people, everyone around the world actually, that the best thing you can be is happy. right? Then this person is going to become a degenerate, because that is the logical train. If you start from seeking happiness, no matter what, you end up filled with all sorts of terrible habits in your search for happiness, pleasure, satisfaction. But if you tell a child, glory is the best thing, right? Then, and if he can develop a taste for glory, the way people develop a taste for happiness, then this child would be disinterested in fast food, in sensory pleasure, because it's not giving him what his psychology is asking him to pursue, which is glory. So we do tell people to chase happiness, do what makes you happy, right? I think that's such a bad, it's bad advice individually, and when you add it all up, when you have billions of people only chasing personal happiness, then you get this world where people want, let's try this new cuisine, let's date a new person, let's watch a new TV show, let's this sort of constant chase of new experiences and new people and the new food, because what else is there?
Yes, back to just the instant gratification of the world. Everybody's looking for happiness in the moment right now, because that's what you can feel, rather than having fulfillment over a long period of time, or whatever kind of virtue you want to put in there that is more of a long-term.
Yeah, how do you sort of deal with someone who is fulfilled by these things, by instant pleasures?
That's a great question. I would say that one, just would ask them why or what about it feels fulfilling, because they might think it is, I don't know, the alcohol or the food that is fulfilling in and of itself, but essentially it's something that is much deeper than the actual physical thing that they're doing, and trying to get to the root of that. And once you get to the root of that, you're potentially able to find, something that is hidden from their, conscious mind of why they resort to these one of these things or the other. And if they're able to kind of see the real truth for it, then they might be able to start to make a change towards something that, again, is long-term horizon focused, something that gives you fulfillment in a broader sense, rather than this instant gratification moment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I like to tie it back to the taste for the hunger for the higher. You just have to poke people and sort of point out that they are pursuing lower, lesser goals than what they could be pursuing. And it works on myself. Maybe this is something that only works if you do it with your own self. It's such a waste of time and energy to not go for the bullseye. Imagine not aiming for the bullseye. That's retarded, right? And people totally do that in life, where the bullseye would be the best possible thing that you could do. And people don't even aim for it. But why are you even throwing the dart? Why are you even in the game? Since you are in the game, you might as well try to aim for the bullseye. And so I pass in and out of this feeling, right? But when I pass into this feeling that if I am going to wake up in the morning anyway, what's the point of not trying to play grand games? What's the point of not trying to actualize grand ambitions? I have to wake up anyway, right? So you might as well, do the highest possible, the difficult thing, the higher thing. And then I sort of forget that. And then I'll not necessarily go on a crazy drug binge or something, but I might choose to automatically, unconsciously pursue lower goals, and it happens in a very, slippery sense where I might not even notice it. But, and then my mood might go down, and then I might start sort of getting restless. And then, pleasure might become more interesting to me. This is something which happens to me, that if I am pursuing a difficult goal and if I'm emotionally invested, then I'm less interested in pleasure of any sort. But if I don't have a goal, then I'm bored. Then I need pleasure, right? Then I go for something pleasurable, which, maybe I can do it half off sometimes, where I am half directed towards a goal and half pursuing something which is just a momentary pleasure. But for me, goals save me, man. For me, having a certain bullseye to hit, a certain deadline, a certain metric, a certain number. It could be a dumb number, hit 150,000 followers. in 3 months. It's arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. It won't probably change the actual quality of my life that much. And I think the difficult part is the buying into it biologically. You know what I mean? Like, the difficult part is you can have it as a psychological thing, but if you don't feel it under your skin, all over your body, then you won't pursue it with vigor. So
Yeah.
I think that's a mystery. Like, I don't know how it goes with you, but sometimes I am able to sell the goal to my entire body, and then I pursue it with dedication and ferocity. But sometimes I can't actually sell it to my whole body, and then I do this half-hearted thing, which is, worthless.
No, I'm actually going through that right now with myself. I at the beginning of the year agreed or said I was going to do an Ironman at race at some point this year,
Yeah.
and the race that I was planning on doing is in November, and so 5 months in, got another 5 months to go to do it, and I had this realization a couple weeks back, is that to that point of just like psychologically the goal's there, like I want to complete an Ironman, I want to do an Ironman, but my heart's not there. I haven't sold it to my biological self yet. And so I'm in this kind of just mode right now of just like, I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it. So it's very half-assed. And so I'm trying to figure out, if I care about this goal, is this goal something that is meaningful to me that I want to spend the next 5 months training for, getting ready for? And if so, like, how do I sell that to the rest of myself to be
weird, right?
Yeah, to be fully involved and fully engaged and do something that is, again, purposeful, rather than just doing something to check the box of doing it.
Yeah, it's weird to have like sub-personalities and to just have this internal civil war going on. Like, what is that, right? But yeah, like different parts of you would have different interests, and then you kind of have to bring them on the table and get them focused. And yeah, Nietzsche has this very interesting line about like, there has to be a tyrant inside you. Like, you have 10 different personalities inside you, and they will war all the time. And then there needs to be that one tyrant who is able to, use his whip and use his charisma to bring them in order and get yourself together and go in one direction. But yeah, it's not a science. It's not something which you can, there is no system to it. It's something you have to like feel your way through.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good place to kind of pivot here. And what I mentioned before we started recording is got a bunch of different quotes or just ideas from your book. That one everybody should check out. I'll have in the show notes. One of my favorite books that I've picked up recently. And so, like I said, I figured we'll just run through a bunch of them, see how much we can get through over the next, half hour here or so.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nick.
And so let me pull it up. And so can you see that? So the first one we got here is, the best among humans never achieve quiet happiness or enjoyment. They're too full of creative energies. They always get what they yearn for, new struggles against the frontier. Their creative life is a curse, but there's a grandeur inherent in it too.
Yeah, this is Spengler, Oswald Spengler. This is his book, Man and Techness. And there was an image uploaded. So Trump got convicted yesterday on 34 charges. And there was this image of Trump being completely beaten down. And it's an old image. It's not a new one. And the image actually, I don't think it's a bad picture, because I think it shows the burden of kingship, right? And someone I follow on Twitter, I forget who made this point. So not an original point. But when you look at a show like Peaky Blinders, right, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen. Have you seen it?
Yep. Love it.
Yeah. So Thomas Shelby, played by Cillian Murphy, looks tortured 24/7. He looks like the weight of the world is on his shoulders. And in a way it is. So whenever you have actual power, whenever you have actual freedom, it's not a walk in the park. It's not enjoyable, right? People miss their childhood so much because they had no freedom. So they had no choices to make, and they had no burden of being a human, of being a person, right? Because they just had to do whatever their parent told them to do. They could whine a bit or not whine a bit, but they had to do it anyway. So that freedom of not, that option of not thinking is unavailable if you want to be an adult. You have to think. You have to make choices, and then there are extreme versions of that. And I think the people who go through the most extreme version of that are the creative people, the leaders, the geniuses, the kings, the mafia bosses. I think this paragraph describes that. It describes the torture of having to choose, because every choice you make creates something new, right? If I choose blue or orange, if I'm a painter, if I choose to kill the character or not, if I am a storyteller, if I choose to, get in that business or not, if I am a CEO, every choice creates a new world. It destroys other worlds. And that is pure torture. So, yeah, I like this bit in the book because I think it expresses that it's not all roses at the top. Yeah, heavy lies the crown for sure.
Yeah, there's a quote that Elon said on what's his name? The guy who always wears a suit. Why am I drawing a blank? Yeah, Lex Friedman pod. And he goes, people think they want to be me, but they have no idea what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to, last a day in my shoes, essentially. And when I heard that, I've always had that idea of just obviously heavy lies the crown, and the more power, the more responsibility you have. Just with responsibility comes problems that you have to solve. But that really stood out to me as just a very kind of easy modern day example of this exact thing. We all say we want power. We all want to be Bezos. We all want to be Elon. We all want to be these, super powerful people. But I don't know. Do we really? There's a lot that comes along with that.
Yeah, it's unpleasant. It's it's still deeply unsatisfying often because, see, anyone less ambitious than Elon would be quite happy with what Elon has achieved if he was Elon. But given how ambitious he is, given that the goal is literally going to Mars, he feels like a failure. He feels like a failure every day. And that's so unpleasant. If your goals matter to you, right? That is the downside of having a goal, that you feel like a failure 99% of the time, except on the day of victory. But then if you're someone like Elon, he's trying to do 5 possible things at once. So you don't even feel that great on the one time you actually get to a major milestone, because then you've set yourself 10 other milestones. Yeah. So that's the curse.
Yeah, and I think it's just something that, again, you don't have to be Elon level, but everybody wants the advancement in the career, to be the boss, to, again, have more power in their own lives. But I think there is a ceiling for everybody that you can bust through that ceiling, of course. But is it a ceiling that you want to bust through? What is on the other side of that? And it's a question that in our modern day world, pursuit of more money, of more power, more this, more that, it's not a question that many people ask. Is do I actually want more? And what does that more bring with it that I'm not thinking about?
Yeah, it's difficult to emotionally sell yourself the pain. I want more, but then you've probably grown up enough by that point to know that more means more pain, first of all. And yeah, I think this is why most people don't become who they can be, because I'm not sure if there is a rational reason to max yourself out. I think you would have to be driven on by a demon, or, I don't know, there would have to be a spiritual reason. What could be the rational reason of stretching yourself to breaking points again and again and again? I don't think you could logically argue for that, actually, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
Next one. The only people who achieve much are those who want knowledge so badly that they seek it while the conditions are still unfavorable. Favorable conditions never come.
Yeah. What do you like about that? That's C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, so that one stuck out to me because as someone who recently quit my job, this was 2 years ago now, but something that I'm sure a lot of people think about, but a lot of people say, oh, now's not the right time. Now's not the right time to do this, to quit and start my own thing. Now's not the right time to get my health in order. Now's not the right time to make any meaningful change. But the truth is, there will never be the right time. There's always going to be something that is stopping you, or that you could use as an excuse to stop you from doing that thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that is exactly what is appealing about this, right? And he gave this lecture right before World War II, and he gave the lecture to Oxford students who were worried about the redundancy of academic pursuits in the face of a giant global war. And they were thinking, what's the point of reading some old book? What's the point of studying anthropology or literature when thousands of people are dying on the global stage, when bombs are falling? So yeah, the does beauty matter when the bombs start falling? That's the chapter heading, right? And C.S. Lewis's answer was that, war is a temporary break in the permanent game of life. And the game will always be what the game is. We are seeking knowledge, useful knowledge, not empty information. But we are seeking knowledge, we are seeking beauty, we are seeking connection, we are seeking power, Nietzsche would add. So just because there is a war doesn't mean that the nature of life changed. So he was trying to express that point to these Oxford students. And yeah, it's a great 4-page lecture. It's called Learning in Wartime. Yeah, people should check it out.
Speaking well suggests the speaker can observe the world, collect his thoughts, and express them properly. It reveals social skills. Therefore, we judge potential mates by, among other things, how well they speak. And this one stuck out to me for two reasons. One, just along the mating idea, but also, I'm sure you saw the clip that went kind of viral over the last couple of days of Peter Thiel basically saying that any just like numbers-based skill is going to become irrelevant with AI. And so speaking skills, communication skills are going to be what is most important in the future, but it is a skill that has been severely diminished over the last 20, 30 years with the increase in technology.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, which is funny, right? Because it was supposed to be the other way around. And well, yeah, it's pretty weird. I was surprised that AI got to beautiful images sooner than it got to poetic text, right? Because I hadn't thought too deeply about it, but I would have assumed that text is easier than images because there are like 1 million pixels and there are like 50 words in one passage or 100. Like, why is it harder to nail the words? And I didn't have a dog in the fight. I didn't want the answer to be one thing or the other, but I think that is what has happened. Like, the AI-generated imagery is stunning and pretty realistic, but AI-generated text is clunky and boring, and you've got to keep asking the AI to redo it, and it doesn't work at all. So I'm not.
Why do you think that is?
It's a big mystery. I think maybe then what is. Maybe soul is closer to language than it is to images in a way, right? Because AI doesn't have a soul. We do, arguably enough. But maybe language is more fundamental to likes than images in some strange way. Maybe that, and it's a great victory for the word cells, as the meme goes. Yeah. And this passage, it's from the chapter about Geoffrey Miller, who's a great academic. And he's written this great book called The Mating Mind. And this is one of his essays. So the idea is that people listen to each other in social settings and guess what your intellect is by how you speak, which is obviously what happens, among other things. And it's a very useful tool, right? Because you can instantly tell how smart someone is by how they are wielding language. And so the idea is that, sexual selection happens at the literary and the spoken plane and also other planes, the physicality. We judge each other's faces and bodies and all that, but also how people speak. Yeah.
And I think another great point of that, it might be in one of these quotes here. I forget if I included it, but just, I don't know if it's the same book, but I believe it's the same guy, still Geoffrey Miller, just humor and like why we love comedians. Is one, they're obviously extremely smart, but they're able to communicate in such a specific way that is one, just very poignant and intellectual, but funny and relatable and just giving us this info in a way that is so different than any other way that we typically receive this type of information. And so it helps them stand out above everybody else.
Yeah, no, a couple of my single comedian friends would doubt the veracity of Miller's point. And they would doubt how sexually attractive it is. But yeah, the general point being that something about speaking well equates to power, which equates to sexiness, right? Like something about being able to observe the world properly and communicate what needs to be done with the world properly does make you powerful, which does make you sexy. And what comedians can do is do that while also making you laugh. So they are sort of working at an added level of difficulty, right? Like to be honest and truthful about the world is hard enough, but then they are adding that layer of, but also make it funny. So that's what we admire about them. It's nice to look at humor from like an evolutionary perspective, right? Like, why do we crack jokes? It's actually not obvious. We don't need to survive. All other species live without cracking jokes. So like, why? And yeah, the mystery of humor. It's one of the things that the evolutionary psychologists work on. That's why I like evolutionary psychology. They pick up these interesting questions. Why do we crack jokes?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, I've listened to a bunch of different podcasts, read a few books on evolutionary psychology as well, and just to that point of there are things back to the point of just like Lindy, like everything that we have now or do now, there is a reason for it. Just that has lasted thousands and thousands of years. So, what is that reason? We don't know why for a lot of things, but inherently there is some benefit to it. Humor, comedy, you can say it helps bring people closer together per se. But again, like every other animal species have families and friends and stuff like that, and are able to interact with one another without it. And so what is it bring to the table that, again, have lasted forever, but also why do we enjoy it so much? Like, why is being funny such a positive trait that people enjoy having that person around because of it?
Right, and I'm not sure if I covered this book in my book, but Homo Ludens is a book which explains this in its own way. And Homo Ludens argues that kittens play, puppies play. So play is not something which is purely human. Human babies play, and obviously human beings play. More than $1 trillion are spent every year watching and playing sports. So sports and games and play are obviously very interesting to us. But what is humor but like playing with language, right? You're just doing interesting things with language the way a gymnast does interesting things with her body. So
yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Play principle and apply it.
This is what we were kind of talking about. Randomness and its benefits explain why we value apparently useless pursuits like sports, creative works, and a sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll go to the next one. The most worthy and laudable citizen is the one who is most like all the rest. Hence, we repress our urge to excel. This one hit me.
Yeah.
Hit me hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to tell me why?
Yeah. I mean, one, just how democracy represses excellence. The chapter title in and of itself, we're always told that democracy is ultimate form of government, the way that most people succeed, and especially here in America, where I don't know if I'd necessarily say we have a democracy per se at this point, but when you really think about it, like, of course, there are people who excel, but in order for a democracy to really function at its best, it needs a lot of these NPCs, for lack of a better term, of people just kind of doing what they're told and show up to work and crunch the numbers and do this and do that. And if we had 7 million or 7 billion, or in America 300 million Bezoses or Elons or whatever, like, it's not a high functioning society.
Maybe, I think it will work. It will work differently for sure, right? If just to go with the sci-fi hypothetical, what if there what if there was a society with 300 million 170 IQ geniuses? I think it might work, right? It might actually work, because I think ultimately we should think about, and this was eugenics and it got super unpopular, but we're okay. Countries totally compete over having the tallest building, right? Countries totally compete over having the tallest statue. The world's tallest statue is in India right now, but I'm sure 10 years later, some other country in the Middle East or Europe or the US, someone will try to build a taller statue. So why shouldn't we try to come up with more intelligent human beings? Like, as far as I'm concerned, the pursuit is exactly the same, right? Intelligence is good, so you want more of it. But yeah, this quote, right? This idea that people repress their urge to excel because democracy demands it. And I think, just take me, right? Like, I have been alive for what? I don't know, 8,000 days or something, right? And on different days, I am a different person. Some days I am extraordinarily hardworking and focused and indistractable and completely on it, right? And some days I'm not those things. And the me, which is those things, makes the other me's look bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually not fun to think about my best days. It's not fun at all. It doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel like shit because I know that I'm not always at that white heat of intensity. So even within a single individual, if you actually cultivate some self-awareness, this is why self-awareness is not something that I don't think we should distribute it broadly. I don't think we should tell people to be self-aware because it's pure torture in my case. Because all that I think about is times when I've been excellent, when I've been magnificent at my job, at my work, at my creative task. And the rest of the days when I'm not those things. And then I feel like shit. So what this quote is talking about is that thing happening, but with different people. So when you see someone do something incredible on a motorcycle, or when you see someone do something incredible with their voice, like singers, or with their bodies, like dancers, you can either admire it and want to move in that direction or want to be excellent at whatever it is that you do. Or you can hate it, or you can be like, fuck that bitch. She probably is a gymnast because she had privilege and she had training facilities, and anyone can do that with the right amount of family background, which is wrong, obviously. So I think, yeah, this is the thing. It's actually, this is something which I'm sort of becoming increasingly sensitive to, that not everyone does enjoy great success. You think about someone like the Wright brothers. They put human beings in the sky, in the stratosphere. And ideally, it would have been better if we were a species that just simply celebrated achievements like that. Like Elon Musk is the modern, equivalent. He's doing things in aerospace and putting internet on super fast planes, and they're going to Mars. And it's insane to see on the internet that he's hated by millions of people. Like, how absurd is that? Right? Like, and then these people are like, oh, he's not very intelligent. Oh, he got an emerald mine in inheritance. Oh, he just bought Tesla. The company was ready-made, waiting for him. He's not a smart guy. He's the stupid person's idea of a smart guy. It's absurd to make that claim, right? Like, when a single guy excels across 10 different domains while having 4 to 10 mercurial relationships and birthing 10 children and being an active life player in technology and politics and being the world's most famous man and still being productive, like, the argument that he's not smart is just bonkers. Like, it stuns me that people can actually sincerely believe that. But they do, and I think they do because, at some level they must look at someone like him and feel terrible because they are not quite pushing that hard. No one is pushing that hard. And in a way, Jordan Peterson's great line is that the ideal is a severe judge. The moment you idealize, the moment you look up to someone, then that is severely judging you now because you're not moving towards the ideal fast enough with enough devotion, right?
No, it's crazy. And to your point of looking at greatness, whether it's Elon or anybody, and just to not be able to admit that is a very just cognitive bias or whatever it technically would be, that what they are doing is without a doubt great. And just to not be able to admit that, there's some crazy just internal battle you're going on with yourself to be able to look at that and be like, oh no, like he got lucky. He's got everything handed to him. And it's just a very, very weird just state of being where you get so caught up in this somebody else's life and their achievements that you just hate on him from your own 1-bedroom apartment while he's doing these incredible things, moving humanity forward.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, he doesn't pay enough taxes. Like, the guy paid more taxes than anyone else in human history. Like, the accusations are so weird. Like, they don't even make sense.
Yeah, complete disconnect. It's crazy to see. Next one. We are held to our duty by laziness and timidity, but our virtue gets all the credit. Some people rebrand their inertia as consistency. Others rebrand their cowardice as a stoic control over emotions.
Yeah, this is who? This is the French guy whose name I can't quite pronounce. The French nobleman, La Rochefoucauld. How would you speak his name?
I would have no idea where to even begin.
Yes, Moral Maxims and Reflections. Yeah, I should learn to pronounce all the names of the writers that I'm covering. That is something I have to be good at. But so this is a great quote about people rebrand their vices all the time, right? I'm not a coward. I'm pro-social. I like people, So I've experienced this in very small scenarios where it's obvious that the right thing to do is to disagree and to strain the relationship in the service of not even truth, but in the service of something better than getting along, right? Like, getting along with people is great. Obviously, you should get along every opportunity you get, but that's not the highest thing in the world. If you have a cousin who is mistreating his mother or his father or his coworker or his pet, you should strain that relationship and point it out. And you should do that because you're connected by blood. In a way, you guys are supposed to do that for each other. And you can't just not do it and then just call it your sort of, I was just sort of, I know how to like manage relationships. Like some people like to take credit for being very good at being agreeable and getting along with everyone. But what they are actually is they're cowards. They can't risk any separation. They can't risk any disapproval. They're scared. And then they'll rebrand that as some sort of virtue. Because if you're convinced you're being virtuous, then you'll never change. So, the danger is, if you have a vice, you better know it. But people are like narrative creatures, right? Everyone is. And we tell stories about who we are to ourselves and to the world. And part of the editing that we do is we tell a different story about who we really are to look better in our own eyes and other people's eyes.
Something that I know myself struggled with for still to this day, but a lot previously, to that point of just specifically like agreeableness, people pleasing, and you're just like, oh no, I'm helping people out and being virtuous and being the nice guy. And while that is half true, the other half is you don't have a backbone, you're not sticking up for yourself, you're not speaking what you believe if it is different than what the other person is saying. And so to your point of telling ourselves a story, it's the same thing happening, but two completely different stories. And one we tell ourselves because it makes us feel better about ourselves. And we don't have to change if we're necessarily just being nice rather than not sticking up for ourselves. Two very completely different things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is a great book. It inspired Nietzsche. It was very inspirational for aphorism writers, for people who like to express a lot of insight in very short sentences.
Yeah, and what I love about with this book and what you write about, but this book was written in 1665. So again, we talk about this in the present day, but this guy's writing about this 400, 300 years ago. These human problems, struggles that we have that just span time. Crazy to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, hypocrisy, a timeless problem.
Exactly. Next one, an education that teaches kids to be curious about everything and judge nothing is failing at its central task. Chesterton argues it's impossible to separate education from the question of values. Education can't be neutral. The very purpose of education is to help kids tell good from bad.
Yeah, this is a fantastic book, What's Wrong with the World by J.K. Chesterton. And he in fact, divides the book, and you should read this book. This is like my top 5 recommendations. It's so entertaining, it's hilarious, and it's profound, which is not a combination that a lot of people can get right. So the chapter headings are very interesting, but the book is divided into 3 parts. I think the first part is the mistake about man. The second part is the mistake about woman. And the third part is the mistake about children. And it's great. It systematically tackles the different psychologies of men, women, and children. It's fantastic. But this quote is, it's from my book. It's me paraphrasing C.S. Chesterton. And this is one of my favorite chapters where he's talking about education. You know how the goal of every teacher apparently is to have open-minded students and to graduate students who have an open mind and who are tolerant and all that. And Chesterton, he's making exactly the opposite case. So Chesterton says that the whole point of opening the mind, like opening the mouth, is to close it on something useful. And he was involved in arguments with George Bernard Shaw, who was the famous English playwright. And George Bernard Shaw wrote in some essay that, I don't like the fact that education is so dogmatic these days, right? So Bernard Shaw is writing in some newspaper that, why do we have to be so dogmatic? Why do we have to brainwash these young children with these strict truths? And Chesterton replied, he said that, if you don't like the fact that education these days is dogmatic, then you better hang yourself, because education is dogma. And that is so true. I completely agree. What is the point of education except to give firm truths to students that they can use as tools to navigate life? Isn't that supposed to be the whole point? Do you want to give confusion and double standards and chaos? Is that the intellectual legacy that you want to leave for your children, for the next generation? Like, why would you want that? Why wouldn't you want to give firm, solid truths as your intellectual legacy, right? And he argues this point from 10 different angles. And the crux is this, that if you're curious about everything, then you're this lifeless twig floating around, right? Curiosity is amazing, but curiosity with direction. Curiosity doesn't mean that you have no convictions. It should not mean that you have no convictions. It should not mean that you refuse to judge, right? You can be curious about the motives of the murderer without thinking of him as a morally acceptable agent. He's not. You know what I mean? You can be curious. Maybe it will help you catch the next one before he commits the murder. But we are suffering from a terminal curiosity that is too scared to judge. And Chesterton saw that happen in 1910, and he wrote about it, and it all feels ridiculously contemporary.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we are about as far away from that in the education system today. Essentially, people leaving potentially with more questions than answers at this point.
Right. And, one very haunting line that Chesterton said, I forget which book, probably Orthodoxy. He said that wars will be fought to prove the grass is green. Flames will be kindled to prove that 2 + 2 is 4. And, that just sounds absurd. Why would you fight a war to prove that the grass is green? But his point was that people will actually disagree with reality in such a fundamental way. The ideological fork will be so extreme, the polarization will be so extreme that you will actually fight over the definition of what is true, what is a man, what is a woman. The famous documentary from Matt Walsh, right? And he was right. We are literally arguing over whether the grass is green, whether someone is a woman or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely insane. The most terrifying thing about the road to hell is how uneventful and gentle it is. A small compromise, a tiny sin, a fleeting moment of cowardice, repeated over a lifetime, and you're in hell.
Yeah. This is a great fable from C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. It's a very short book. You could read it in 60 minutes. And it's a very symbolic story. It's a story about a bunch of ghosts who are going from hell to heaven. And you get to hear the conversations of these ghosts. And, they're talking, and some of them are not so bad. Some of them are pretty terrible ghosts. And So this is a point about slippery slopes, really, right? Where there is no big fork in the road which tells you heaven is this way and hell is this way. It's all microscopic choices. It's all little things. There's an excuse for it. Like, there's always a convenient story for why you did not do the right thing. The famous meme, now it's a meme, it's a bit from this film about how King Solomon tells one crusader that when you're facing God, you cannot say, I was told to do so. You cannot say it was not convenient. You cannot say virtue was not convenient at the time. You are the sole keeper of your own soul. And you have to answer to God one day, right? And I think that is a heuristic that I have to answer to God one day is enormously useful, which is one of the major blind spots of atheists, right? That they don't see that the heuristic of feeling like you have to answer to God one day is so useful. It will actually get people, it will actually push people in the right direction. It will extract the right choices from them. And yeah, what this bit in the book is talking about is, you won't become a villain all of a sudden, right? Like, you won't become like Dark Vader with one move. It will be very gradual and you have to remain awake to it. So I think what this bit is talking about is just remain awake to the small little, things that you are letting slide. And it doesn't even have to be your own mistake. It could be a small act of disrespect from someone, right? Like, how does disrespect begin? Never in a big way, actually, right? Like, if someone starts to disrespect you, it could be anyone. It could be a friend. It could be a partner. It could be a coworker. It could be it could be anyone. It will never be one day they like you and the next day they are cursing you, right? It will, small things, small acts of rudeness. And if you don't catch it and if you don't curb it, then one day the disrespect will be unbearable, actually, right? So, yeah, like vices, bad things have this interesting quality, like they slip in softly.
I loved it because you can extrapolate it out to the societal level as well, right? Like, I think what we're kind of going through now is just, all the craziness with the trans stuff or just politics in general or just all this craziness that is apparent in our day-to-day world. Like, it wasn't there 10 years ago, like, and it didn't happen overnight. It's like we let something happen and it got into a little part of the cultural talking points, and then it grew and grew and grew, and 10 years later, now it's just this huge thing that people are arguing about nonstop, but
Totally.
You don't even know how it happened or how we got to this point. But to your point, it's just repeated slowly over a long period of time, and you end up in a place that you have no idea how it even happened.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is why Jordan Peterson resisted the Bill C-16 and the Canadian Parliament way back 8 years ago in 2016. And his point was exactly this, that, today you're asking me to use your made-up pronouns. Tomorrow you will be asking me to use your made-up gender identity. Next week you'll be asking me to, refer to you as a different sex. And it doesn't stop, actually, right? Like, the absurdity, if you think that there is a rock bottom to the absurdity, you're wrong. So you might as well resist at the first sign of bullshit.
We're all learning that right now. And we'll do one more here. The genuine coherence of our ideas does not come from the reasoning that ties them together, but from the spiritual impulse that gives rise to them.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you like about this?
So for me, this one stuck out because I've always been a very logical person, where I try to reason everything in my head. And if it doesn't make sense logically, then I don't believe it. I don't, give more thought to it than that. But over these last couple of years, I've gone much more down a spiritual path of trying to find a relationship with faith. And since I've been doing that, I've see the world completely differently, think about myself within the world completely differently. And is there something, deeper to it that actually makes it make sense and gives us something to stand for? and it's to the point of like we all have our thoughts about the world and how it should work and our place in it. And if you come at that from a very just logical standpoint, you box yourself into this small container of what the world is and what could potentially happen. Where if you have this broader spiritual belief system that you're able to incorporate it, it allows for just a much more abundance of ideas, beliefs, thoughts to actually take place.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you're right. There's something very restricting about a purely materialist world, which is also one of the many reasons I don't like the free will deniers. It's like such a weird conversation to have with someone. They're like, oh, I don't have free will. I'm like, all right, then, I guess you don't. Like, I do, but okay. So, yeah, this quote is from Nicola Davila, and he is talking about many of the things that you talked about. What I like about this quote is the genuine coherence bit. The idea that we have our beliefs, but then there's a background, there's this like spiritual atmosphere in which our beliefs float. And that is not necessarily like a logical thing that you can sell to someone. And it may not be something that you can explain. It may not be something that you want to explain. So when I go admire magnificent architecture, if you really made me do it, I could tell you why evolutionary psychology explains my admiration for the architecture, right? Like I could give you a reason for why I like it, but I don't really want to. Even without having thought of the reason, my admiration is no less. And probably my admiration isn't coming from a rational place. Because there totally are people who aren't that invested in beautiful architecture. They don't want to go see it. They don't want to stand there and admire it. They don't want to build it. So are these irrational people? Not really. Some of them I know, they're pretty smart actually. So then why can't they see it? Because spiritually they're in a different place, right? Spiritually they're coming from a different place. So yeah, like our likes and our dislikes, you can totally tell materialist stories about them, but they're coming from a different place. Like they're coming from a much stranger place. They have spiritual origins. Yeah, I mean, on a tangent, George Orwell talked about how a demon possessed him when he was writing 1984. And he said that if I could control it, I would never write a book like that. It's too exhausting. It completely broke me physically. It was unpleasant to do. But I didn't have a say in the matter. Like, I was possessed, basically. So I think this guy has no reason to fib. He has no reason to create a spiritual story. He wasn't a spiritual guy. He wasn't a committed Christian, or he wasn't committed to any religion, actually. A pretty secular person who was a communist at some point and that saw the problems with it. So yeah, when you listen to like a secular artist like that speak in the language of demons and speak in the language of like being possessed to do a creative job, then you start to see the wisdom of this ideas like these.
Then just a quick kind of random question here. How much of the just position that we're in as society, as a human race, to the point is a result of going more secular, would you say, of the downfall of kind of religion in general?
Yeah, I don't think we are secular. So, there is this argument that we've become secular because people don't go to churches and temples and so on. But we just go to different churches and different temples, and we believe in different gods, and we believe in different heresies, and we believe in excommunicating people on Twitter. Like the entire religious architecture is completely intact. People totally still go and listen to gurus. The gurus, which is an Indian word. It means the saint or the teacher or someone that you look up to. People totally have gurus, right? The gurus are now social media influencers. But the religious architecture of looking up to someone is totally intact. Because we need to have faith. We need to hold on to unprovable absolute laws, right? Like we need someone to worship. We need the lines that you may not cross. There are totally lines in modern culture which you can't cross, right? And with Elon, the reason they've descended upon Elon in hopes and they're trying to prove that he's somehow not smart or somehow not a good person is because he is attacking the root of the dogma, not even directly. He's just allowing people to say whatever they want as long as it's legal. But people totally get flustered and they totally have anxiety attacks at the idea that anything might be said using words, So yeah, I think we're having problems as a planet, and different societies are having different problems because we're not worshiping the right gods. We are going to have worship gods. We are going to have the 10 commandments, right? Or the 12 rules of life. Like, we're going to have something. We're going to have moral boundaries. We're going to have the oughts and the ought-nots. But the trick is to have the right oughts, the right ought-nots. And that is the job, right? It's a terribly difficult job. Different societies try to do it in different ways. And we are doing a terrible job at it. Like, what should be allowed isn't allowed. And what shouldn't be allowed is allowed in the name of tolerance. So I would trace the problems back to that. But there's a funny story about Roger Scruton when he was asked, so do you believe in censorship? And he said, yeah, as long as I'm doing it. And I didn't even think that's a terribly bad answer because there are going to be things which are going to be censored. We all know that people have been jailed for social media posts. Their bank accounts have been frozen. They have been taken off the internet basically for believing certain things. So censorship seems to be a permanent fixture of social communication. But yeah, as long as you have the right censor, it can't be too bad. We don't have the right censor now. That's the problem, not censorship.
That's fascinating perspective. But Jash, I could sit here and talk about this stuff with you all day. I really appreciate you coming on. Last question that I ask all my guests is, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I think I'm a restless person. I think my why has to do with a desire for conquest in my own ways. I don't know if land conquest is going to be open anytime soon in this century and this era. But yeah, I feel like my sort of very real answer for why I write or why I speak or why I write books or why I want to make movies is that I want my ideas, my memes to spread. Ideas are memes, they spread or not. And I want my memes to be successful because I think there's value in that. But it's not an act of social service, right? It's not, I'm inspired by Mother Teresa. Like, to be very honest, it's also selfish. It's also that I like my memes, my ideas. I think that they have value, yes. But also, it's a game. It's a fun game. I enjoy the game of this mimetic game of like trying to spread your ideas. And then there are all sorts of like downstream consequences of belief systems. And, people pick their game. So this game seems interesting to me, and I enjoy it. I think the stakes are high, but in a not a very immediate sense, like whether I tweet or not isn't going to change the world in the next 2 weeks or 2 years. But the ideas that people believe in does absolutely shape their actions, which does shape the world. So it's in a way, it's almost being divorced from the concrete world. But ultimately, the concrete world is a reflection of what people believed in. So I think I enjoy this space of like sort of like determining the spiritual source code of the world and then seeing how it pans out.
I love it. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about what you do, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter. Twitter would totally be the Twitter or X, I would, that would
always Twitter.
Spot. Always Twitter. They can find me using my name, Jash Dholani, or Old Books Guy, which is easier. That's my handle, Old Books Guy. And yeah, I love hearing from people. So if you have any questions, doubts, or comments, or anything you want to talk to me about, totally do it. Text me.
Awesome. I'll have that listed in the show notes so people can easily find you, reach out. But Jash, thanks again, man. This is great.
Thank you, Nick. It was a lot of fun. I loved your questions, and thank you for your time.